Hi everyone, I'm Nate Bartlett with Berkshire Hathaway, and today we're going to bring a video to you on spalling. And we got an awesome guest who's agreed to join us and kind of give us a little educational background on the topic. Trent with Rapid Permits has been so gracious enough to join us. And Trent, why don't you tell them a little bit about your business and what you do?
Will do. Thank you, Nate. So I own Rapid Permits and Engineering. We're a full-service permitting engineering company. We primarily do anything spalling, marine construction, docks, seawalls, dredging, boatlifts, etc. So just being where we work is this close to the saltwater, spalling is a very common issue.
So Trent, we're at this house right here, and tell us a little bit about this spalling. Like, how do you know this is spalling versus like a traditional settlement crack? Like, tell us a little bit about what we're looking at here.
Yeah, definitely. So settlement cracks, as Nate said, what you're typically going to see with a settlement crack is they're going to be linear in nature, whether the house is on a block and whatever. When you have a settlement crack, it's going to follow that contour. Also, when you have cracks in the from settlement versus actual spalling cracks, what will happen is you might see a crack, like a hairline crack here from settlement, but that crack it'll possibly grow vertically as more settlement happens, but you won't see this kind of outward pressure on this surface for the spalling. So,
yeah, I don't know if the video is picking it up, but it's bowing kind of out from the house itself. So when you see something like this, you know, I've always heard you got to address it early and often or it kind of grows. Is that true? Like when you see the first sign, should you go after it?
100%, yeah. So when you see the first signs of actually spalling externally, it's indicative of obviously a much bigger problem internally. So the spalling will start far before you see any kind of outward actually fracturing or pressure coming out like this.
So what is it? It's the salt and the rebar, the metal that's actually, you know, causing it, right? It's not the concrete, it's the metal?
Correct, yeah. So what spalling is, or well, backing up, what people don't realize is concrete is actually porous. It absorbs water, takes water in. It's porous in nature, it's like a sponge. It will absorb water. So what happens is you have the rebar inside of this wall, and as it takes in water, that combines with the oxygen, and it literally rusts inside. That's all it is. It's rebar rusting inside. Now, as the rebar rusts, I'm sure many people have seen any kind of rusting metal, but it expands. So as this rebar expands, spalling rebar will create actually between 5,000 and 10,000 pounds per square inch of pressure outward. Wow. And that's in all directions. So like the rebar starts rusting internally, but as it gets worse and worse and worse, it expands, and that's when you see the actual outward cracking like this. So it's very, very strong. And the reason it does it can be just the acidity of the concrete, the salt air, obviously, or like Nate actually mentioned before we started this video, whenever you have openings that come into the walls, whether you put on shutters, anything like that, you're screwing holes into it. The rebar is only so far inside this concrete. And the closer the rebar is to the edge of the concrete, to the exterior, the elements and whatnot, that means the faster water is going to get to the rebar, so spalling will occur sooner.
And you do a ton with docks, not only houses, but you know, you do a lot with docks, and you'll often see that rebar on a dock, that rust spot, you know, where that spalling starts. So what should someone do on a house? This is really typical. They replace windows with hurricane impact windows and doors, and they'll take and remove those shutter brackets off of the door. What should they do with the holes that then are left from that, you know, screw that got popped out of there?
Yeah, 100%. So anytime you take that out, you should always seal it with some kind of epoxy. That watertight epoxy, that keeps any water from going into it. Because if you say your rebar is 3 inches in from the edge of this wall and it was all sealed, now you put a hole here that's 3 inches deep, you're right at the rebar, and that's just allowing water and more salt air to get into it. So when you seal those up and then paint over them, that's going to be your best course as far as making sure you don't have any issues.
So we did a video on a house that's under construction, and the concrete company brought in their own water. They wouldn't even use the water on site. They brought in their own water, which leads us to a conversation about how they used to build houses in the Keys. You know, I've heard they would literally pump it out of the canals, or you were telling us the story before we started about a stone quarry. Tell us a little bit about that. You know, is it true? Did they literally use salt water to mix concrete back in the day, and how long ago? And
yeah, 100%. So salt water was used. I wouldn't say it was used as the primary source of water, but when they're mixing concrete out here and they run out of water, there you go. They're bringing some water in because they can't just stop construction. And then actually, back in the day when they had quarries like in Grassy Key and different parts of the Keys, they're actually digging the rock out from the ground. That's coming straight out of the salt water. So water tables, 2 feet below the surface, they dig 20 feet down. All that rock all the aggregate's coming out with salt water on it. And they would use that aggregate in the concrete mix. And that's just, I mean, literally salt right, right in the
Man,
concrete.
yeah.
So it's, yeah, definitely asking for it.
Okay, Trent, so once a homeowner identifies that, yes, they have spalling, walk me through the process of like, what do you do with it? How do you repair this? What does that process look like? Walk us through the repair.
Yeah. So what the first step that they would have to do is figure out how far the spalling's gone. So they would actually start to just come to the worst spot and start chipping away the plaster, stucco, concrete, etc., until they expose the rebar. Then once they've exposed the area of the rebar, they're actually going to keep expanding that area outward in all directions. So if you open this up and that's all rusted. And there's certain points, if it's not too bad, which to your point is why it's so important to get ahead of early, because if it hasn't started spalling too bad, you can actually put anti-corrosive coating on it and then just patch it with concrete, reseal it, repaint it, and you're done. Now, if the rebar inside has rusted too bad, so there's actually a formula on the thickness of the rebar. Once it's lost a certain amount of its thickness, it can't be reused. So then what they're going to do is say, okay, this section of rebar has got to go. But they have to keep chipping it back to either they find unspalled rebar that hasn't rusted yet, or they have to chip it back until that formula works, and then they splice on a new section. So if they cut out a foot of rebar here, they keep going back till they find clean bar, and then either add a new section of rebar, or just add where they need to, and then coat that area.
Are they welding in the new piece of rebar? Are they using like the ties they use when they pour concrete to adhese those, and then epoxy it, concrete it? How do they?
Exactly, yeah. So once they get back to the part of the area of good rebar, there's a lap splice measurement. So depending on the size of rebar, you would take, for example, 30, if you're going 5-foot section, you might have a 30-inch lap splice on the end. So you'd have the existing bar, you lap over that 30-inch of the new one, tie it to it, and then run that bar section out and retie the whole mat.
So definitely something, the earlier you get it, the less it's going to cost you to fix it. Don't let it get out of hand, right?
100%, exactly. Gotcha. Because once they start opening it up, there's really no set price for spalling. It varies in all cases, but once they start opening it up, they just keep going until they don't find any more spalling, and that price is going to continue to change. So, and once you see it, like I said at the beginning of the video again, but once you see it here, it's going way further. So as soon as you start seeing cracking, that's really when you get on top of it right away.
Gotcha. Do you need a permit for this?
You do need a permit for spalling. yeah. I was just actually at a job the other day where they started chipping it all up. Obviously, it's one of the loudest things you can do at your house too. Breaking this all apart, cutting things, hammering concrete. So almost every single time people get called on spalling for code cases.
So make sure and call Trent for a permit.
Yep.
Awesome. Let's head to the dock. We'll put Trent's info down in the information below. Make sure and check him out. He's got an amazing Instagram channel where he does a lot of education on topics like this. Kudos to you. I love your channel. So we'll put his information down below, and let's go check out the dock, and we'll look at that spalling as well.
So this is a great example of where you have a previous piece of hardware that was attached here. Whether there's most likely a bumper here or something of that nature, but you can see the holes where there was actually drilled in prior. There's some other holes up here, and then some that look like they've been patching over time. So this hole, it's just allowing salt water to get into here. So the spalling in this area has been exacerbated because of this. So if this, like when this first started, before you start seeing this cracking and everything, what you would see is this rust staining dripping down. That's gonna be your first sign of spalling every single time, is rust stains at the surface. But this spot specifically has just been exaggerated, and it's happening here first instead of other areas, because number one, it's closer to the water level, so it's getting more salt exposure, and number two, because of this protrusion, salt is actually getting further in towards the rebar at that location.
Thanks for watching, everybody. If you have any additional questions on spalling, feel free to reach out to me. I'll connect you with experts like Trent. I'm always happy to help. I love learning and passing on that education to you. You know, this is a topic where it comes up, whether it's the dock or the house. It is a prevalent issue here in the Keys and something you need to know and understand, so don't be afraid to ask questions. Trent, thank you so much for taking the time today to kind of talk to us and give us that education.
Yeah.
Super appreciate it, man.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nate.